Over half of the Lebanese people now live in poverty. 1 in 3 Lebanese suffer from food insecurity, and nearly 4 million people are at risk of not accessing safe water. To give you some numbers, at the end of 2020, according to the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 19% of Lebanese nationals reported loss of their main source of income. In March of 2021, 78% of the population, that's 3 million men, women, and children, were estimated to be in poverty. An estimated 36% of the Lebanese population, that's 1.38 million people, are facing extreme poverty.
The UN announced this disturbing data in early 2021. Lebanon, a founding member of the United Nations, whose country name is derived from the white peaks of the Lebanon mountains covered in snow in winter, is stuck in a deep economic and financial crisis. The situation continues to worsen, with no prospect of improvement. Last November, Pope Francis met with Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati at the Vatican. During a 20-minute one-on-one conversation, the Pope said it was worth fighting to save the crisis-stricken country and that he wanted to support it. In this edition of our program, we will learn about the situation of Christians in Lebanon. Glad to have you back here at EWTN UN Blog. Professor Fadi Daou is chairman and founder of the Lebanese Adyan Foundation, where he is also academic director of the Leaders for Interfaith Understanding program. He is a professor of interfaith dialogue and geopolitics of religion at Holy Spirit University in Kaslik, near Beirut. The sponsor of the university is the Maronite Catholic Church. Mr. Fadi Daou is the author of many books and articles, and he is also a priest, but uses his religious title only when he is officially acting on behalf of the Church. I now welcome Fadi Daou. Good afternoon, Professor Daou.
Good afternoon, Christian.
33% of Lebanese are Christians, including 1% evangelicals. Now, there are various Islamic extremist groups, including Hezbollah in the south and in other Shia-majority regions. In your opinion, is there persecution of Christians taking place in Lebanon?
Yeah, let me start by saying that Christianity in Lebanon is extremely diverse. We have 12 officially recognized different religious communities or different denominations. So including different Catholic churches, Eastern churches, Orthodox churches, evangelicals. So this is an aspect that by itself is important, I think. And the other aspect is that the Christians in Lebanon, true, they are now around a third of the population who are still living in Lebanon. There are more than that, but part of them immigrated and is living abroad. But those who are in Lebanon and who constitute almost a third of the population are disseminated in almost all over the country. There are some regions that are more predominantly Christians, but the Christian presence is almost everywhere in the country. So this is a fact to take into consideration, which means that the Christians coexist on their daily life, with other communities and specifically the Muslim community. You mentioned the Shiite community and more specifically Hezbollah in this community, who has a very strong presence, for example, in the south of Lebanon, but also in the northeast of Lebanon, the region we call the Bekaa in Lebanon. You spoke about persecution or direct persecution for Christians. I won't put it in these words because I don't think there is a persecution per se, exactly targeting Christians because they are Christians. It's more, I would say, implicit challenge or problem, which is in fact related to the global objective, I would say, to a movement, to an Islamist movement like Hezbollah or any other Islamist movements who would like to implement in Lebanon or in any other country an Islamic state. The aim of Hezbollah, in fact, the official name of Hezbollah is the Islamic Revolution in Lebanon, which means that they primarily objective is to implement the Islamic Revolution, which is based in Iran. Its center is in Iran, and it wants to expand all over the region, and even, I would say, in a way, all over the world, in their publicly shared objective. So to implement this Islamic revolution in the form of a Shiite Islamic state in Lebanon. This objective of Hezbollah as a long-term objective threatens the existence of a civil state, of a state where the Christians can be recognized, can live equally with all other citizens in the country. So this is another form of persecution. Maybe it's better not to call it persecution, but it's a challenge, it's a danger, it's a risk for the Christian presence, because definitely Christians won't accept to live under an Islamic regime. The impact of the presence of a militia like Hezbollah with an Islamic objective like the Islamic Revolution on the Christian population is a very bad and problematic impact. And in fact, it's one of the reasons that is pushing Christians to leave the country, and that's why they are today almost a third of the population, while a few decades ago were more than half of the population.
In Lebanon, there is a worrying trend of sectarian and discriminatory language in the media and on social media, including hate speech and censorship. In this context, it's worth mentioning that in October last year, Lebanon's oldest English language newspaper, the Daily Star, closed or was forced to close its doors after almost 70 years. The former editor-in-chief wrote about it. Its history, that is, that of the Daily Star, is the history of Lebanon, which in less than 15 years went from being a promising country to a failing state. End of quote. Professor Daou, who controls, who is behind the mass media and its biased reporting in your country?
Yeah, as you know, in Lebanon we went through a civil war, and the civil war took an aspect of even a war between different religious communities. Part of the war was very much related to or labeled based on different religious factions and communities. And unfortunately, those who were the head of militias during the war are today part of the political establishment. And so I think that what we see today in the mass media, and especially also in the social media, reflects, it's not the production of the media, but it reflects, in fact, the very polarized agenda between the different sects. I mean, and the politicians using the sectarian narrative to ensure and foster their political power. So I personally believe that what we see today in the mass media, because if you take, for example, the Lebanese TV channels, most of them are either directly owned or financed by different political power. And because these political powers are using the sectarian polarization to foster their presence, so the media is reflecting, in fact, this narrative. The more problematic, I would say, is the social media, because we see also the same polarized sectarian narrative in the social media. Unfortunately, this means that the younger generation also, who are mostly the users of social media, are also being influenced by this polarized sectarian narrative and replicating it in their communications through social media. So the problem, I think, is structural, is political, because of the sectarian politics in Lebanon and because of the political establishment and power who are using this polarized sectarian narrative to keep their predominance on each one of them on his or her community.
The goal of Adyan Foundation is to develop the skills of young people, particularly in the MENA region and the Middle East, North Africa region. Recently, however, the foundation has realized that the same challenges it faces in the region require a broader perspective and the inclusion of people from other regions of the world as well. Therefore, it is now targeting the Mediterranean region, Europe, and even global audiences. Pope Francis received your Prime Minister Mikati at the Vatican last year. Do you think the Pope can contribute to fraternity between people of different religions, politics and lifestyles, for example in Lebanon?
I do think that Pope Francis is really contributing to foster this friendship and fraternal relations between people across religions. I think this charter, this declaration on human fraternity that he co-signed with Imam al-Azhar, the Grand Imam of the Sunni community, and then during his visit to Iraq, when he met also Grand Ayatollah Sistani, who was one of the most prominent Shiite, also representative in Islam. I think he is giving this not only the image, but at the same time the message that our religious differences are not an obstacle to live really in fraternity. And I think he's doing this by also pointing that we are co-responsible for some global and common challenges, like the environmental challenge or health or other type of challenges, peace, for example. So definitely Pope Francis is being a real messenger of interreligious fraternity.
Isn't it sad, but isn't it the case that the same problems that you are experiencing in your region in Lebanon are in some way the same problems that we are experiencing here in Europe?
I totally agree with this question. I mean, fundamentalism, extremism, polarization, sectarianism, populism in politics, I mean, identity politics, all these problems are now, I think, present, unfortunately, almost everywhere in the world. And this is why I think we are widening progressively also the work that we are doing from the MENA region to Europe in the Mediterranean perspective, where we could have a more collaboration between southern countries, Middle Eastern countries and European countries and even beyond.
Pope Francis has already announced last year that he would like to visit Lebanon as soon as the government was formed. That happened in the meantime. A Vatican official confirmed that the Pope's visit could take place this year. We will keep you updated on this. Finally, after the gloomy information about Lebanon, we do not want to forget to mention the beautiful, scenic and culinary sites of the country. A country that has to offer on about 10,000 square kilometers both snow-covered mountains and beautiful beaches on the Mediterranean Sea. And hopes to be one day again an international tourist destination. In a recent newspaper article, I read that a grocer in Lebanon summed up the situation. He said, "We are waiting for God to help us."